Have you ever wondered why we value democracy so highly, despite its flaws? This question takes us back to ancient Athens, the cradle of democracy and a civilization we hold in high regard. Interestingly, this city-state also birthed another great achievement, philosophy, which, oddly enough, was quite skeptical of its democratic sibling. Enter Socrates, the founding father of Greek philosophy, whose image we often find in Plato's dialogues. He was not a fan of democracy, to put it mildly. His skepticism stemmed from a deep-rooted concern about the indiscriminate power of voting. He believed that not everyone should have the right to decide who rules, especially without proper education. This pessimistic view of democracy, coming from one of the greatest minds in history, presents us with a fascinating paradox. Now, let's dive into what Socrates thought about democracy. Imagine a ship heading out to sea. Who would you want in charge? This question forms the crux of a conversation between Socrates and Adeimantus in Plato's The Republic. In this dialogue, Socrates compares society to a ship on a perilous voyage. Would you trust just anyone to navigate the treacherous waters, or would you prefer someone educated in the rules and demands of seafaring? The answer seems obvious, doesn't it? We'd want the most knowledgeable and experienced individuals at the helm. But here's where Socrates flips the script. He parallels this scenario with the way we choose our leaders. Why do we think that anyone, regardless of their understanding or experience, would be fit to govern a country? Socrates argues that voting is a skill, much like navigating a ship. It requires knowledge, understanding, and critical thinking. It's not a random intuition that everyone inherently possesses. To Socrates, democracy without education is like sailing through a storm without a captain. So Socrates believed that voting was a skill, not a random intuition. Socrates' own life is a tragic demonstration of his views on democracy. In 399 BC, he found himself standing before a jury of 500 Athenians, facing trumped-up charges of corrupting the city's youth. This jury, composed of ordinary citizens with no special training or education, was tasked with deciding the fate of one of the greatest thinkers of their time. The philosopher's fate hung in the balance, determined by those who may not have fully understood his teachings. After intense deliberation, the jury, by a narrow margin, found Socrates guilty. The sentence was death by hemlock, a tragedy that echoed through the ages for those who value critical thinking and rationality. It was a stark illustration of Socrates' concern about democracy, that without education and wisdom, the vote of the masses could lead to disastrous outcomes. And yet Socrates was not an elitist. He believed in intellectual democracy. What's the difference between intellectual democracy and democracy by birthright? Let's delve into Socrates' perspective. He believed that voting wasn't just a right but a skill. It required education, rational thought, and a deep understanding of the issues at stake. He didn't advocate for elitism, but for an informed electorate. Contrast this with our modern practice. In our democracy by birthright, we extend the vote to all, regardless of their comprehension of the issues. It's an egalitarian approach, but is it a wise one? What happens when decisions of national importance are driven by uninformed impulses rather than reasoned judgment? Socrates warned us about such a scenario. He foresaw the rise of demagoguery, where charismatic leaders exploit our desire for easy answers, eroding basic freedoms, and leading us down disastrous paths. Socrates warned us about the dangers of demagoguery, but have we heeded his warnings? It's a question worth pondering as we navigate our modern democratic landscape. Imagine an election debate between a doctor and a sweet shop owner. Who would you vote for? Socrates posed a similar question to illustrate the dangers of demagoguery. The sweet shop owner, promising instant gratifications, might easily sway the crowd, while the doctor, prescribing bitter medicine for long-term health, might not be as popular. This analogy underscores how easily we can be enticed by sweet promises, overlooking those who speak hard truths. In today's hyper-connected world, where rhetoric often trumps reason, Socrates' warnings are even more pertinent. We are bombarded with information, yet starved for wisdom. We are seduced by charismatic leaders promising quick fixes, while those prescribing measured, thoughtful solutions are often sidelined. Socrates' cautionary tale prompts us to ask, are we voting for the sweet shop owner promising instant delights, or the doctor advocating for long-term well-being? So, while we celebrate democracy, let us not forget Socrates' warnings about its potential pitfalls.